G'day. Welcome to the Financial Bloke Podcast, the podcast for people seeking the wisdom needed to grow their family's wealth and live a happier, healthier and more prosperous life. My name's Ben Law and I am the Financial Bloke. G'day everyone. Today we've got Shane Bird with us. Shane's currently living in Australia, but he was born and raised on a farm over the ditch in New Zealand, or as we call it here in Australia, the Eastern Island of Australia. Now, after leaving school, Shane served 6.5 years with the New Zealand Army, where he also completed a carpentry apprenticeship. After leaving the Army, he decided to return to his roots and went back to farming with his family. And in 2015, Shane came across neuro-linguistic programming, or more commonly known as NLP, and realised how significantly this can impact the quality of his life. Through the journey of self-improvement, Shane found his purpose in life and has set up his own mindset coaching business and has a special understanding of the challenges that people in business, and more specifically from the land, face. I remember when I originally heard about personal development and mindset as a young man, I didn't take it too seriously. For many years, I just believed that hard work and being smart with what you've got is all you needed to be successful. But what I came to realize after 2 decades of working with and observing highly successful people, that I couldn't have been more wrong. Being smart and working hard was part of the recipe for both personal and financial success, but the key ingredient was the right mindset. And I didn't just observe that occasionally, but time and time again. And I believe ignore your mindset at your own peril. So today, Shane and I are going to talk about what is mindset, why it's so valuable, and if you want to be personally and financially successful, how you can manage and improve it. So on that note, welcome, Shane.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Fantastic. Okay, so I like to ask every guest this. So for us to get a better idea of who you are as a person, Shane, what would you say is one of your key personal values, and how do you think that has contributed to the person you are today?
It's a great question. One of my key personal values is the awareness, like having awareness of what's really going on, because that leads into the next sort of one, which is growth. Because if you restrict yourself, then you don't have the awareness to create the growth. So for me, it's creating more awareness of what's going on, what's possible, and what I need to do in order to be able to grow. And then once you grow, growth is growth. It's just going to keep you going and becoming more in your life. And that for me is really, really important.
Look, and I think that's part of mindset is actually continually improving. I think it was the Japanese said the Keynesian principle, I think from back in my economics day, Keynesian, which was continuing, never-ending improvement. And I've probably butchered that in some way.
No, I just read that last week actually in a book.
And that's apparently, from what I've read, a lot of the reason why a lot of Japanese companies became really well known for their quality and their workmanship was the fact that they continually focused on just getting better and better every day. So no, that's a great value, and I think we all try and aspire to that. So I suppose, Shane, let's just dig in here. So what changed in you to make you go from being a farmer to, I suppose, just essentially a mindset coach? And can you give us a bit of a sense of the journey you went on and how it became such a big change to your life? Yeah,
for sure. So brought up on a little small village, 30 kids at school, stuff like that. Didn't really learn how to socialize or fit in, and took on a fear of rejection and fear of being on my own and all that kind of stuff. That's a short version of the childhood, but that just really set me up to really not having that confidence to step out and grow and become more. So I just was living a comfortable life. I was just going through life, just, getting by, little family, stuff like that. Had no real goals, dreams, or aspirations. And that went on. So, once I left school through the army time, and then once I left the army and it was back on the farm and stuff, again, just didn't have those dreams, aspirations and stuff, and was just going day by day, living paycheck to paycheck. And it wasn't until I just got, same thing with that personal development. I heard about it and I was like, oh, what's this about? And then just got exposed to a little bit, had some CDs that I was listening to from, Tony Robbins, the godfather of personal development, was listening to those for a number of years. And it just started to awaken me, gave me the awareness that I talked about, right, of what else is possible. And was doing that for a number of years, finally decided to bite the bullet and go to one of his seminars. And then, again, was completely out of my comfort zone in a room of 5,000 or 7,000 people. I forget what it was. But again, in that room, raised the awareness even more. And then that led me down a whole path of different personal development stuff, which led to the NLP, the neuro-linguistic programming. And then once I got there, I really understood how we think how we create the beliefs and the thought patterns which operate in the background every single day, which produces the patterns and behaviors that we keep playing out. So it really showed where I was sabotaging, where I was holding back, what I was procrastinating on, what I was resisting. And then by going through the NLP training and understanding all that and understanding how to reverse all that and change it, it just gave me that self-empowerment within myself. And then I was just telling people about it. I had no intentions of being a coach, but I was just telling people about it in my local community and, when I was hanging out with anyone, and they'd be like, oh, hey, can you help me with this? Can you help me with that? And then it was like, sure. And then they were like, hey, can I pay you to help me? And I was like, well, okay, cool. And then just by doing that over a short period of time, I realized how fulfilling it was to help other people get change in their life, because I knew what it was like to live for 40 years or 38 years without any change. And then to help other people make that change in a short period of time too, really gave me that fulfillment in life. So I really, found my purpose because I was fulfilled in what I was doing on a daily basis. So then I was like, wow, I should actually, I could make a living out of this. And so that's when I set up the whole coaching business full time. And then it's just really grown since then. And again, it's just that fulfillment. It's just constantly filling up my cup, knowing that I can help people make positive impact in their life, because I know if I change one person's life, it's going to change their partner, their kids, people in their community, everyone else in the family. So it's the ripple effect. If I help one, I know I'm helping at least 10, which is just a really great way to help someone. So then if we all did that, it would change the world, wouldn't it?
Yeah, couldn't agree more. I mean, I used to believe that in my, I still do. Sorry, I didn't used to. I always was a believer that with my financial advice practice, I spent so much time trying to educate everyone I worked with, not just give them advice. So it was about an education process, because I believe that you would have that ripple effect. If I can educate them, they'll make better choices. They'll then be able to pass that on to their kids, their extended family, other people in the community, and then just everyone does so much better. So I couldn't agree more with that sentiment. And I think awareness comes from education, because what you don't know, you don't know. And sometimes that can be good. Ignorance is bliss in some cases, but for most things it's not. And look, I think we should probably dive in now to, Shane, is what it actually mindset is, or your definition. And just to sort of, I suppose, put my 2 cents worth in before we start, is the quote I remember hearing years ago. And again, I butcher these things. I make them into Ben's butchered quotes, but something along the lines of, if you believe you can or you believe you can't, you're right either way. And so, to kick it off, how about you tell me what your definition of mindset and why it's important?
Yeah, I think that sums it up really well, is what do you believe is possible for yourself? And just because you believe that now doesn't mean it's true. Like, we all create a container, I call it a container of our comfort zone, which is where we're like, okay, this is what I'm capable of. And if I get outside it on the bottoming end, it's going to result in pain. So I'm going to do whatever I can to get back in the container. But the question is really, how can we stretch that and grow the top end of it so there's more pleasure in life, right? Because if you don't do that, if you don't grow that pleasure, then you're just going to stay in that one comfort zone, which is going to get you exactly what you've got right now. And if that's good for you, then that's great. But if you want to grow something, you've got to stretch your container by stretching your mindset, because your mindset's holding you back. And how do you do that? You change your beliefs about what's possible, because whatever you're getting right now is what you believe is possible for you right now. So if you're not happy with it, you need to change your belief around what's possible. And then it's a question of, well, what's stopping you from believing what is possible? Yeah. And that comes from all the past programming, the negative beliefs, the negative emotions or negative charge that you've had on other events, where maybe you went out to try and do something and you got punished for it in one way or another. You failed and you got ridiculed, or you achieved something and you lost some friends and you were like, oh, actually, I favor having friends more, so I'm going to stop achieving so I can keep my friendship group. Whereas you don't realize that by achieving more, you're actually going to go out and create a different friendship group, or bring some of your friends with you so that you can have more in life.
And it's interesting, Shane, I've struggled with mindset a lot of my life. I've probably tried to be a high achiever, but one of the things I've naturally done is I've aimed high, but I've not got my expectations high. So my self-talk in my head is, oh, well, I probably can't do that. I'll be just comfortable to get a little bit better than what I've got now. And there's been that real conflict in me to be that real high achiever, but don't get overconfident, because if you don't reach your goals, you're going to be severely disappointed. And I think a lot of people suffer from that, and it's almost like a failure to launch in some ways. Is that fair?
Yeah. I think there's two things with goal setting, and one of them is set something. Like, if you don't set a goal that's big that it scares you, it's probably not big enough. However, if you only set that goal and you don't identify the steps that are required to get there, you'll feel like it's out of reach. So I always say, set a really big goal that's that's going to really stretch you. And then go, right, what are the real key important steps that need to happen that are really easily achievable in order for you to reach that goal? Because if you don't set the steps, if you don't have the strategy to get to it, then you're never going to get there because you're just going to be wavering all the way through life. So it's really about, set the big goal, but make sure you've got achievable daily tasks or things that you can do that you know that will help you get to that goal. Because if you achieve the little thing, it's all about building that self-belief and self-confidence and self-esteem. Just building it with little things rather than just going, I need that one big thing that's going to make me feel confident. Well, it doesn't happen like that. It's like a little thing. You don't go to the gym and look like Arnold Schwarzenegger after one session, right? It's like he goes constantly over and over, constantly pushes himself just a little bit more every single day. And then, years later, gets the results.
Is it also the meaning you attach to things, Shane? So, for example, if you do, and I'm putting in inverted commas here, fail, I believe that failure is their lessons, not failures. But is it also the meaning you attach to things? Because I see that out in the world quite a bit. And I used to see it in people all the time where there would be an apparent failure. And I'd find the people that were less successful would go, I failed at that. I'm never going to have another go at that. I'm embarrassed. My ego's taken a dent. And I'd see other people that would go, that didn't work. Oh, well, I'll have to try a different way, and off they go again. Is that sort of clearly another way of looking at mindset as well?
100% is what does failure mean to you? And again, it comes back to probably the very first time you failed at something, a school test, or, you did something around the home. Maybe you dropped a plate of food or something. That was, something, and then you get punished for it. You get yelled at by one of your parents. You're like, I failed to carry the plate to the table. Now I'm getting punished. Or I failed the maths test and the teacher called me out in front of the class and the other kids laughed at me. So what's your meaning of failure? And like I say, it comes from something really early on, but how can I reframe that now to go, well, actually, that was one way to not carry the plate, or that was one way to not pass that test. What do I need to do? What do I need to strengthen within myself so that I can become a stronger person and know more, raise my awareness, grow more, and then I know how to do it a better way. Like the guy Dyson took 5,127 attempts to create the ideal vacuum cleaner. That means he failed 5,126 times. So what actually he looks at it and goes, I learned 5,126 ways not to do it.
Might have been Edison with the light bulb. I think did the same thing.
Yep. And along the way, those guys found like Edison found ways to create an explosion and stuff, for example, right? So it's like, what am I learning along the way through the things that didn't quite work the way I thought it was going to?
And is it set? So what I mean by that is, some people label themselves as I'm an optimist, or I'm a pessimist, or I'm a realist, etc. Is it something that's set, Shane, or can it vary? And if it can vary, is it tough? So I'll give you one question rather than 3 or 4. Is it set? And if it isn't, why isn't it?
Well, it's not set because being an optimist or a pessimist is on a scale. You're either more optimistic or more pessimistic. You're never fully one or the other. So it's not set. It's just identifying where you are and then asking the questions, what can I do to become more of what I want to be? So if I go, I'm actually quite a bit of pessimistic kind of person. I'm not 100% pessimistic, but it's like I'm back here, I might be 80%. How can I just take that to 70% and then 60% and then 50% to the point where it's only 10% pessimistic? And then that's going to give you more growth, right? Because you're going to be like more optimistic about what's possible. And by doing that, you start raising your awareness and looking for opportunities.
Yeah. And it's probably not healthy to label them either, because like you said, if you say, oh, look, I'm a pessimist about things, you start to tend towards that side, would you say? Because I think there's problems with both ends, isn't there? The eternal optimist that doesn't see the dangers coming and just thinks, living in fairyland, skipping around as all unicorns and fairies, versus the person that's down the other end that sees, asteroids hitting the earth and everything's doom and gloom. I mean, both sides are bad. So the labels that have to be pretty dangerous, I suppose, is the right word.
100%. If you label yourself something, your confirmation bias is going to find other ways to confirm that you are that. So I give the example, and this is quite often relevant in the rural sector or farmers, is like anger. Like if I tell a story about when something happened on the farm and I got real angry at some sheep that had ran off down the gully into some blackberry, and I was angry. I was going, I'm so angry. I remember saying, I'm so angry. And as soon as you say you're angry, you start reinforcing that. So you find other ways to confirm that you're angry. When really, if I reflect on it now, I was just annoyed. And if you go, oh, that's annoying.
Today's episode is brought to you by AgriCoach. You've worked bloody hard over the years and you've built a solid operation. But as your children grow up and start their own journeys, you're beginning to think about the next 5, 10, and even 15 years and how to keep driving the business forward and ensure a smooth and successful succession plan. Preparing the business, preparing the next generation, and preparing for your eventual retirement all requires a solid plan and a proven process. Unsure about the right steps to take? Head on over to agricoach.com.au/webinar to learn more about our Succession Proof Your Family webinar. AgriCoach, aligning families, growing wealth, and protecting legacies. And now, let's get back to the episode. That's the level of toxicity, I suppose, in the words, isn't it? You know, I'm extremely angry versus I'm just a little annoyed.
Yeah. Yep, 100%. And it's like I say, as soon as you label yourself and add emotion to it as well, then it's just like it puts you in a different vibrational frequency, which means you just reinforce it and create more of it.
Yeah, we'll get your emotions all rolled up. And I've found that with my daughter, actually, because I've spent a fair bit of time working with her with this sort of mindset stuff, I suppose you'd say, in my unskilled, uneducated way. But we talk to her about when she gets really angry is to say, well, are you really angry or are you just a little bit annoyed? And I can actually see that in her, which is just bizarre. I can actually see when she goes, oh, no, Daddy, I'm just a little annoyed, how her whole demeanor changes. She becomes calmer. She's able to think through things. But when she says, I'm really angry, you know, she changes again. So, yeah, I think those words are really, really important. And it's the old self-talk as well, isn't it? Oh, you know, I made a mistake again. You're such a loser, Ben. You're so stupid, Ben. I mean, those things play in our head, don't they? And they all are part of mindset. Is that correct?
100%. The most dangerous thing you'll ever hear is what you say to yourself when you're on your own. You know, like that, oh, I'm a loser, Ben, or you're a failure again, Ben. Well, actually, if you say that silently to yourself, it's incredibly dangerous. But if you go, oh, okay, that didn't quite work. What can I do better? Straight away, you open up your awareness and you go, okay, what else can I do? What can I do differently? Instead of just being stuck in what didn't work. Because then you get stuck, you know, that tunnel vision, you get narrowed down and you just restrict all your opportunities to see what's really going on. So self-talk is huge. It's massive. You must constantly be building yourself up. And people go, oh, yeah, but that's egotistical. That'll make me sound like I'm arrogant. Well, it's not really. Arrogance is showing up to an event thinking you can win. Confidence is doing all the work at home, showing up knowing you can win.
There's a big difference between the two. And people feel that too, don't they? Like you can meet someone who's confident. And I know Joe Rogan, who's one of the world's biggest podcasters, I know I've heard him say before some of the calmest people he knows are fighters because most of them have been humbled so many times by getting their backside kicked that they know that they're not the best, but they just practice and practice and prepare and they've just got this air of confidence about them. And when they do lose, they go back and they go, righto, what are we got to do to win next time? And it's just a completely different mindset of the winners.
Yep, 100%. Yep.
Okay. And so I remember seeing years ago as well, and it might have even been a Tony Robbins thing where they talked about, there was someone being interviewed, a psychologist or someone in the biology field, and they were talking about actually standing confident. So they were saying that the old Superman pose or the Superwoman pose, and there was some scientific research showing that if you stood in that, I'm standing up like Superman, I look like a weirdo, but you can actually change the chemistry of your body to actually, have a better outlook or do better. Is that what you've seen as well too, Shane?
Yep. Yeah, I've seen that research. Tony Robbins talks about it a lot. It's called the power pose. And from memory, the stats on it is it increases testosterone by 22%, lowers cortisol by 20%, and you're 30% more likely to take action. And what do? You just stand like Superman, hands on your hips, chest out, chin up, looking at yourself in the mirror, ideally for 2 minutes, and then it'll get that result, the 22, the 20, and the 30% change in your physiology, right? And your everything within you.
Yeah. I'll have to get you to explain that to Sarah because I'm pretty sure if she comes home and sees me standing like Superman looking in the mirror, she's going to have a bit of a laugh and say I'm an idiot.
It'd only be weird if you put the outfit on.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Okay. So the thing I wanted to sort of dig into now, Shane, is I was taught from a young age that being smart and working harder was the secret to success. And I think I talked about in the beginning, it's not the secret to success. It's part of the secret to success. And what I've found is the just work harder idea is not working for people these days. And probably the farming world's really good and the business world for that. Just working harder and harder and harder is not going to get you to where you go. What are you seeing out there in people? Do you see the same thing, that the working harder just isn't working?
Yeah, 100%. And the thing is, like if someone goes, oh, head down, ass up, literally their head goes down, reduces the awareness again, and then they don't actually see what's really causing the problem. So, we get to those times where we have a significant event, whether it's a drought or something goes wrong on the farm, and we're just like, oh, head down, ass up, I'll just work through it and fix it. That's all great. Yep, that's cool. But if you don't have the awareness while you're doing it, of what else could happen, but also the awareness of what created it, then it's going to repeat, and it's just going to repeat, and you're going to be head down, ass up all the time, which results in burnout. That's why guys burn out, because they're not being aware of eliminating it from happening again, and they're just constantly in the grind on the same thing. And being in the grind's great if you're growing yourself, but if you're on the grind doing the same thing over and over again because the same problem's happening, then you're not shifting your mindset around what's really causing this problem. You're just waiting to live out the effect of an event or an action of something or someone, and then grinding your way through it. But if you've got the awareness to eliminate it happening again, then it's like, cool, what can I grind to grow further?
Okay, that's an important point. I'd like to go back and grab hold of that because I think that's a little gold nugget. So what you said there was you're just working your guts out to get through a problem rather than managing it. You use much better words, managing your way through and looking for opportunities. You're just basically enduring the pain. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. Like if you're just slaving away just to resolve the problem, that's all good and well. That'll fix the problem. But if you don't identify what caused it, or if you don't look at other ways to better manage that going forward, then the problem is going to repeat and you're going to have to slave your way through it again, whether it's an hour, a day, a week, or a month, or whatever it takes to overcome that. So it's having that awareness. What the key really is what's causing this problem and how can I eliminate that from happening again in the future? So a classic one is a drought, right? Oh, okay, the droughts happen. I've got to work my ass off through this. I've got no feed. But if you don't go, oh, well, actually next time I'm going to store some feed in anticipation of a drought or a flood or whatever, then you're just going to be working your ass through the next drought for the next 3 months or 6 months or 2 years or 5-year drought, whatever it is. You've got to have those plans in place. You've got to have the contingencies in place. And you might have a shed full of hay for 3 years and it not get used, but I bet you smile when you finally have to feed it out because you're 2 months or two years into a drought and you finally got the ability to manage that rather than just slaving your way through it again.
Yeah, and also accepting the fact that you might get it wrong. So in other words, you might put all that hay in the shed, for example, and then it not turn out to be enough, or 2, you get a mouse plague and it all gets destroyed, or you just never need it. You get 10 years of rain and the world's a great place. And I think we have to accept that we may get it wrong.
Yep.
And that's all part of the process. It's also going back to that, it's attaching a meaning to the event too, isn't it? It's like, well, how do you look at that event? Is this something to challenge me or is this something to destroy me? Is probably another thing I see quite often. And it's the old victim empowered sort of model, isn't it? A lot of people naturally, and I've done that myself. I'm not pointing fingers at anyone. There's been times when I've sat down and put my face in my hands and gone, oh my God, there's nothing I can do about this. And felt like a victim. And then there's the other side of the coin, which is, well, this is an opportunity. Obstacles become opportunities. What have I got to do here to do better? And I think that's an important point as well. Do you?
Yeah, 100%. It's above or below the line thinking. Now, what do I mean by that? Above the line thinking is living at cause, taking complete ownership, accountability, and responsibility for everything in your life. And below the line is living at effect, where you blame, you've got excuses, and you're living in denial. If you're blaming, got excuses, or in denial, it means you're putting it on someone or something else.
What's out of your control.
What's out of your control, exactly. But when you go ownership, accountability, and responsibility, it's like, okay, how am I taking ownership, accountability, and responsibility for being in this situation? Because then you can improve yourself, shift your mindset around it, and become more powerful, more empowered and stronger. And that's where people have solutions, whereas below the line, people have problems.
Yes. No, that makes perfect sense. And, I've seen that probably clear enough in my career with, let's say, farmers and graziers in the sense around rain. Is the mindset around how's this going to work is let's just say the less than successful are worried about the rain, everyone's worried about the rain, but the less than successful are focused on the fact that it's never going to rain and what's going to happen, whereas the more successful are like, well, we need to mitigate or we need to avoid as much damage as we possibly can, but it's going to rain, and we need to be prepared for when it turns. And, sometimes they get it wrong, but most of the time they're able to look at it objectively, have the right mindset to be able to go, it's going to rain. What is our plans? What are we going to do? And I remember the best one I ever saw, which I could never have done it, Shane, but I had a client years ago where they had a cotton property and that big drought probably 10 or 12 years ago out west. And they literally shut the farm down for 2 years where they shut the gate and walked away because they had no water, no rain, no nothing. And they lost $1 million a year. It was $1 million a year it was costing them to have that farm shut down. And then after 2 years, they managed to keep it together and move on. And luckily, they got right to the edge of the wire where banks were saying, we're going to have to sell you. And I know everyone's going to say, oh, yeah, but, not everyone can do that. The point I'm trying to make is then all of a sudden they got a huge windfall at the end. When it finally rained and they got a crop, they managed to catch up on where they were. But it took a lot of guts just to follow it right through to the end and have that, let's say, positive outlook enough to be able to say, we will get through this.
Yep. Yeah. And I would say for them, the difference was hope versus belief. They weren't just hoping something was going to come right. They had the belief that, if we shut down for 2 years, I know that eventually the rain's going to come or whatever's going to happen. And I have the belief that we can get out of this on the other side.
Yep.
Because if you just hold on to hope, you're in fairyland.
Yeah. Of course. And also that's really hard. Like I don't want anyone out there to be listening going, oh yeah, so easy for you to say, Ben, but it is incredibly hard. And like I said, I don't think I could have done it. And it could have gone the wrong way as well. I mean, they could have made that decision and 4 years went by and then finally it all got sold up and they lost everything, but they were willing to take the risk. And again, that's not for everyone. Not everyone can have the mindset to take on massive risk. And that's probably an important point, is that whole eternal optimism doesn't always work for everyone. Is that, or that high risk, highly belief or optimistic level doesn't work for everyone, does it?
Yeah. I would say those people had the belief, but the strategy in place as well. Like you can believe something over and over again, but if there's no strategy to back it up, then it's probably not going to come into fruition. So it's like, okay, this is our belief. We can sit tight for 2 years because I know that, we've got enough to get by. I know we can service the loan and everything. But if we get to 2.5 years, the bank we know are probably going to come knocking and shut us down. However, we've probably got 2 years. So I've got the belief that if we can get by, and then once everything kicks back into place, we'll recover the debt. In fact, we'll pay it off and probably double our profits going forward. Then cool.
Now, so we've worked out mindset's really important. Why do you think there's so much resistance to talking about mindset? Because it's a real factor in living a happy life, a fulfilling life, and also financial and personal success. So why do you think there's a resistance to that? Or what are you seeing out there?
I would say in the farming sector, in the rural industry, it's probably around judgment, a lot around, farmers are hard workers. They just get on and do it. So if I turn up to the pub and say, oh, look, I'm having lots of anxiety or I'm feeling depressed, like that's a sign of weakness, right? And we don't want to look weaker in the other person's eyes. So it's like, I'll just shut up. I won't talk about it. So there's the resistance around the judgment and all that. The other one is this. It's probably not well known in the rural sector, in the farming industry. So it's like a lot of people, although it is definitely growing now. There's a lot more people more open to having those conversations. But early on, we talk about the generations passing on the learnings and stuff. Like Dad never talked about it. Granddad sure as heck didn't talk about it because he lived 80 miles up a one-way road and had no one to talk about anyway. So we just haven't learned how to express ourselves and how to overcome those things. And the other thing too is with mindset, it's not so much a measurable thing. Like it's not like, an investment where I drop 10 or 100 grand on an investment and you can see it growing. You can keep track of it daily, right? Mindset is totally intangible. You can't really measure it. You can do things to get a gauge of where you're at, but it's not like, I'll just log on to my portfolio and check how much money I made overnight or how much my mindset grew overnight, right? It's totally intangible. And it's just more about how we feel within ourselves.
Yeah, and I suppose it's, our gut, for the lack of a better terminology, will tell us whether we're on the right path because we intrinsically know when we're being hard on ourselves or not looking at things the right way. What about the people you surround yourself with, Shane?
Oh, it's 100%. Like that's one of the most important things that you can do. And it's one of the things I teach on all my programs is who you hang out with is who you become. Show me your friends and I'll show you your future. So if you're hanging out with successful farmers, you're going to unconsciously listen to what they're saying, take on their beliefs and their values and learn from them. But if you're hanging out with the unsuccessful guys, if you're hanging out with the drug addicts around behind the pub, you're going to become a drug addict, right?
Well, even the drug of negativity. I mean, if we look at the moment, I heard someone call it the other day, disaster porn. Basically, people are spending all their time looking for bad news and disasters and all those sorts of things, and people are starting to get addicted to the negativity. Yep. And there's a whole subset of people, and I've been around them. You hang around them, you listen to them, you start to take on their beliefs, the feeling, and it's not good. And you're never going to succeed if you've got that view of the world, are you?
Yep. What goes in must come out. And again, use a farming metaphor, what kind of fertilizer puts in is going to have a direct reflection on the growth rates that you get. If you're putting on some sort of cheap shipped fertilizer that, some outfit's just trying to offload because it's been out the back and it's gone all moldy, you're going to get really terrible results. But if you buy the good stuff or you only put good positive stuff in, it's going to give good positive results. So yeah, 100% what you put in definitely comes out.
Yeah, what it was, I heard someone say a long time ago, they said your success is like a seed, and it depends where you plant that seed. And if you plant it in toxic, poison soil, you're never going to get a crop to grow. And I think that's really important. And I'm going to throw my mum under the bus because I always like to do that. She's the number one fan, so I'll throw her under the bus again.
Yep.
She used to say to me when I was younger, growing up, and I only grew up in a small town too, she used to say, Benjamin, I know who you've been mixing with at school. And I used to hate it. It used to drive me insane. And she used to say it all the time. And it was true. It was basically if I was hanging out with the drongos, your behavior would change and your view and your attitude would change. I'd hang out with what I'd look at now as the good kids, or the kids that you want your kids to hang out with. If I hang out with them, my personality and attitude would change, and that's in a child. And so I think mindset is absolutely massively influenced. And I've done a podcast which will come out soon on a dairy farmer in South Africa. And he actually had an average performing dairy farm. And this was quite a number of years ago. And he actually had a group that he basically set up of I think it was about 10 dairy farmers. And they decided they wanted to become the best dairy farmers in the world. And they took average production right up to in the top 5% of all dairy farms in the world, just by mixing together and sharing ideas and having a positive outlook and testing stuff. And he said it just changed my world. And I've heard that called in many different circles, essentially a mastermind group.
Masterminds are huge. And it's exactly that. If you get 10 different farmers, they're going to be an expert in 10 different areas. And it's just like, how can I learn off those other 9 guys and apply that to my business so then it'll grow too? And yeah, that's the power of a mastermind. It's like the 8th wonder.
Yeah, it's fantastic, isn't it? Okay, so resilience. Now, people from the bush are really resilient. We all know that. And it's getting harder and harder to overcome the setbacks. You know, droughts are getting tougher. Then you break the drought, then you're getting floods, then you're getting mice plagues, etc. What are your thoughts about resilience? And how do we get people to help steel their resolve, I suppose you'd say, in a tougher world? And that's just not farming, that's business in general.
Yeah, it comes down to really, is this something you're going to grow through or something you're going to go through? If you just go through it, it's like I said earlier, head down, ass up, fix the problem. But if you grow through it, you become more, so you become more aware and you have that awareness around what's really going on. So then that's going to create more resolve rather than just being resilience is just going through it, go, 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 go. But resolve is when you can grow through it and create more of who you are and be more aware of what's going on. So then you can strengthen yourself, identify other ways to improve yourself, the business, your relationship, all that kind of, your financial position, all that kind of stuff. And then it's just going to help become more.
Yep. Because I also look at it as from a why. I always talk to people in the financial advice world when they come and see me and say, right, Ben, we want to do some investing, or we want to plan for retirement or intergenerational wealth transfer. I'd spend a fair bit of time trying to identify their why. And what I mean by that is, why the hell are you doing this? Because if you don't have a really strong why, the first bit of adversity or setback you get, you're going to fold. So farmers and graziers and business owners are probably the best example of a strong why, because they will hang on, kicking and screaming, and they'll literally fight to the death to stay doing what they're doing. Well, you need a really strong why to do that. So do you find that also ties into that whole model as well?
Absolutely. If you don't know your why, then you're going to get lost. Like you say, you're going to have a financial downturn or hit with some sort of challenge, and then you're going to question your why. But if you've got a really strong why as to why you're doing it, and it has to be like an internal why for yourself. The farm succession thing is something that's quite often spoken about. Oh, I'm doing it because it's a 5th generation farm. But if you don't really want to do it, that's not a why for you. That's a why for the family. And then you lose that motivation, you lose the passion in it, especially when you get hit by some sort of challenge or something and you start questioning it. So then you get the negative thoughts and the negative talk. And then you generally talk to someone else about, I have to do this for the family, which is more negativity. And you just lose that whole passion and drive behind why you're doing it. So then you start doing a shit job. You just go through everything rather than growing through it. So definitely understanding your why and what's the desired outcome. For what purpose? For what purpose are you really doing this?
Yeah, it's interesting. One of the things I used to really enjoy seeing the change in people's view of the world was when I'd work with business owners or farmers and graziers, and you'd see them come in, and generally what I'd find is mum would be really keen to start doing something. Dad's back in the paddock thinking about the cows or the crop or carting grain somewhere. Completely different mindsets. Mum wants to do something to set them up. Dad's just worried about day-to-day stuff and paying the bills. And then what would actually happen is we'd start talking about doing, for example, investing for off farm. And so we'd have to tie it into, well, what's your why for doing this? And for most of them, it was about, well, we want to start to to diversify, or we want to start to build for our retirement. And then what we'd be able to do is work out, well, what are the implications if you don't do this? And so, picking a few examples was, well, if we don't build enough wealth off farm over the next 20 years for when our kids want to take over, they're going to have to borrow a bucket load of money to help us retire, or they're going to have to keep funding us, etc. So that became a really strong why. And once we'd anchored that in, then each year when we'd be moving towards that goal, we just have to tie it back into there. Like if we don't want to do it, or we're starting to get, I like the term lazy, but we start to get distracted or not prioritizing it, well, let's go back to our why originally. And I think that's, for me, was the absolute gold standard. If you didn't have a strong why, you're possibly wasting your time. You're going to have someone externally motivating you. And I found that in my toddler. With Sophie, if I'm trying to motivate her with my why, it's like dragging her, kicking and screaming, and she's 5 and stubborn, just like a mother and a father. But as soon as we get a why in her that's internal, she's so unbelievably self-motivated. So trying to get that why, as I think you just raised the point, if it's someone else's why, you're wasting your time. You may as well, or not give up, but it's going to be a much bloody harder
It's going to be a slog. 100%. It's just going to be a slog, which is going to result in burnout and lack of fulfillment. Like if you're doing it for someone else and there's no fulfillment in it for you, then the lack of fulfillment, which is probably the biggest thing that causes a negative mindset, is I'm not fulfilled in what I'm doing.
Well, that ties into your why, isn't it? Okay. So one of the things I like to do, Shane, whenever I do anything, and I have to mechanically do this because this doesn't come naturally, but whenever I do something like I'll do a podcast episode, or back when I was, being a financial advisor, I'd look at each client meeting and things like that, and I'd go through this process. And my sister actually put me onto it. It was basically what worked, what didn't work, and what could I change if I did it again. And that was the best way to look at things from my point of view, because I was then a lot more objective, and I'd have to say what worked, so what was good, and then I'd be, negative Ben, what didn't work, and then I'd look at saying, okay, well, how do I make changes there? And I think that was called something like progressive mastery or something like that. And I'm guessing you'll be all over it. Do you see that as a really good tool for people to apply to situations?
100%. Yeah, the progressive mastery questions. What went well, what didn't go well, what could be better, and what's the lesson?
There you go, the final step. You're so much more articulate than me. You did it in like 20 words. I did it in 10 minutes.
I actually teach it a little bit different as well. I go best, bad, better. What was the best parts of that experience? What were the bad parts? And what could be better? And then go to the next one is recreate, rehearse it, and then reinforce it.
Yep.
So then that way you design a new strategy or a new system, and you practice it, and if it works, then you reinforce it. Because if you just design a new strategy and you start doing it and it's still not working, then there's no point reinforcing it, right? So, but yeah, that's the kind of questions you want to ask yourself every day. Today, what went well, what didn't go well, what could be better, but what's the lesson? Because then you can apply the lesson going forward. But yeah, definitely you want to be measuring that stuff, because then you can improve on it. Because if you just go, oh, that was today, I'll just start again tomorrow, then you're just going to produce the same results as tomorrow, or as yesterday, sorry. So it's really about how can I improve? And that's, again, raise your awareness of what's working well and what's not going well, and then grow from it.
Good. And also, what about visualization, Shane? I know that's one that originally I sort of looked at and thought it was a bit of voodoo rubbish about trying to visualize your outcome. And I've used that plenty of times intermittently over the years with difficult situations, trying to, in my head, sort of not convince myself, but put myself in a position where I believed that the outcome of this situation will be the outcome I want. Do you find that visualization can you explain a little bit more in your terms, succinct terms, what visualization is and if that's powerful as well?
Yeah. Visualization is huge. So the brain can't tell the difference between an actual event and an actively imagined event. So when you actively imagine something, you're still firing the neural pathways in your mind of actually doing that task. So I'll give you an example. I used to fight rodeo bulls for 19 years. And how did I learn to do that? I learned most of it from sitting at home or lying in bed, visualizing what I would do if there was a wreck. If a guy got bucked off on this side and the bull was there and I was here, I would visualize how I would run in there. If he got bucked off this side and I was over there, I'd visualize how I would run in there. And I just always actively imagine all that stuff so that when I stepped in the arena, I don't know how many times I walked out of the arena or walked out of a wreck and just went, wow, I don't really know how I got out of that, but I know I trained myself to get out of it. Because it's like anything. Once you do anything repetitively over and over again, you just unconsciously know how to do it. So that was my way of learning how to fight bulls. And it's the same with anything in life. That's why all the athletes do visualization. Dan Carter would be he'd kick probably maybe 20 goals at every training, but unconsciously in his mind, he'd kick 200 every day. And that's why he was the best goal kicker in the world. Any golfer, Tiger Woods would have had probably 20 times the amount of visualizations of actual shots rather than the actual shots in the present. So the visualization is huge, really, really huge. And it is just training the brain to produce the result, training the brain to go to where you want to go.
It also leads other people too, I'd suggest. Like using a sort of a practical example for everyday people is if you're going in to see your bank to borrow some more money or to do a review, or, you might be in trouble, for example, things aren't going quite as right. Our natural propensity is to think about all the negatives, like, oh, we're going to, they're going to sell us up. They're not going to let us borrow the money. They're going to put our interest rate up, whatever it might be. It's going to be a horrible experience. But if you can actually just spend a few moments quietly thinking through what would be the ideal outcome here and trying to visualize that in your mind, you'll actually go into that meeting, I would expect, and your demeanor and the way you interact with the people or person you're interacting with will probably be a lot better outcome. And I think the bank's a good example, but it's also family disagreements. How many succession plans fail and family partnerships fail because of communication? And it's because most people walk into those discussions fired up because they've seen the fight before it's even started. And I remember I had a discussion with someone recently going through a partnership split up, which got fairly, let's just say, heated. And I remember the one side of the people that I knew were fired up, but very sensible. And they said, they had this whole plan in their head of how they were going to defend themselves in the meeting. And I just said to them, do you want to be right or happy? Like if you go in and defend yourself and tell them all the ways that you've been wronged, I said, is that going to get you the outcome you want? And they went, no, it's probably not. It's going to make me feel better. I'm like, yeah, well, it's probably going to give you less than you wanted. It's probably going to inflame the situation. Short end of the story, I didn't think they listened, and they had every right not to. They went into the discussion, and before they walked in, I think they were thinking, do I want to be right or happy here, or do I want the outcome I want? And literally the whole meeting was so less confrontational. And I think that's another really important point in families.
Yeah. And speaking of the separations, I see it a lot with separations of like they want to be right, but they're not thinking about are the kids happy, And that's an ego thing is I need to be right. I need to prove he was wrong or she was wrong. I need to prove that they were the reason we split up, but they're not thinking actually what's best for the kids. How happy are the kids going to be? And in a relationship context is, are you coming out of fear or coming at it from love? Anything else, like going in the bank, is are you coming out of fear or coming out of faith that you're going to get the result? Because when you put yourself in that mindset of, okay, I fear they're going to deny me or they're going to reject me, you put your physiology in that lower energy state. So you walk in with your shoulders down and your chin down. But if you, like you say, go, okay, this is the desired outcome. What are the possible objections? There's probably only really 2 or 3 objections that you would get in a scenario like that. How would I handle that? Then you have the ability to create the faith that you're going to get the desired outcome, which is the same as doing the power pose. It's like you will come in a more powerful pose, a powerful state. So they'll see the energy in you and they'll respond to you in a better way rather than going, oh, this guy's scared, we can just brush him off.
Yep. And if you visualize it in your head and the objections, etc., well, then your head's up. You're not just accepting the fact that this is going to be difficult. You've planned the scenarios in your head and you said, okay, well, if this happens, what is my plan of doing it? And then, like you said, with a rodeo bull, you know, if someone says something to you, you know the way you're going to react, or you know your response to that without even having to think. Yep. And it takes that fight or flight out of you, because we naturally all, when we get fearful or in a disagreement, we all lash out. I mean, that's just the human reaction. Whereas, and I'll just drag in another anecdote, but I remember a client of mine years ago. He was a construction manager, very, very high up, and he was the calmest guy I've ever met. I never saw him lose his cool or raise his cool. And his motto was, he, in his case, he or she, who loses their cool first loses the argument.
Yep.
And he went through his whole career like that, and he would just always winning the arguments. And don't get me wrong, he was still smart enough to be able to go, when I'm wrong, I'll admit I'm wrong. So that he wasn't just arrogant to say, that happens. But when he stood his ground, and he found that people respected him for that, because he didn't get emotional, he didn't lose his cool, he was just very factual about things. Now that's something that I've taken on board quite often when I've had things to deal with, is that, Ben, if you lose your cool, you're going to lose the argument. And I think that's something that's worked for me.
Yeah, and that's just the power of a belief. He had the belief that if I lose my cool, I lose. So it was really important to him that he held that belief, and he'll do whatever he can to hold that and support that belief and hold it up because it's very important to him.
So let's say three things. Let's try and find three things for everyone listening and for myself, because I want to write this down and do this myself. What are three things we can do to get control or to work on our mindset and maintain it? Because I think, like you said with the gym before, the mindset or the way you view the world is like Arnold Schwarzenegger with the gym. You can't just go once and say, wow, I've changed my mindset. It's a continual working thing. What are three things you think we could do to do that, to, for the lack of a better term, fix it and maintain it?
The first one is realize it's a process and not a destination. You've got to be constantly improving and growing. And that's where it really, like we said earlier, the fulfillment's one of the greatest things that you can have, or the thing that you want to keep. So it's like fulfillment isn't a destination. It's a process and it's constantly evolving. So realize that. The second thing is living at cause or living at effect, which we touched on. Are you taking ownership, accountability, and responsibility for everything in your life? Or are you living with blame, excuses, and denial? Because if you live with blame, excuses, and denial, you have reasons why your life is shit. But if you're ownership, accountability, and responsibility, you have the results of why your life is fulfilled or fulfilling, right? And the other one is really the thing that really has the biggest impact on that is, well, two things there is your beliefs, but your emotional home. How do you operate as an emotional being? And like you just said about the guy with the construction industry, he had the belief that if he was operating in an angry emotion, he was going to lose. So his emotional home is calm and composed. And that's getting really empowering results from him. Most people's emotional home is anger, frustration, irritation, stress, fear, doubt, overwhelm. And whenever the pressure and the tension comes on, we resort straight to that. And then we have to climb our way back out. But if you train yourself to have a positive, optimistic, content, calm, composed, fun, excited emotional home, where you go to when the stress comes on, when the challenge comes on, then straight away you're on the front foot. That's not to say, there's not going to be times where you feel irritated, angry, or frustrated, but how fast can you get back? How fast can you get back? So, really identifying your emotional home and what are the beliefs you need to have to support that.
Okay, so it's acknowledging that this is a process. So that's the first thing, is to know that we're not perfect creatures. And again, I don't want to paraphrase you here, but I'll put it in Ben's long terms. It's a process and it's continual improvement, and that you need to have your head up, not your head down. So we know, we're aware of that. It becomes rather than an unknown unknown, it becomes a known unknown. Then we want to live within cause and not effect, which means basically we're in control of every situation we're in to a certain extent, and we need to take responsibility for wherever we are. And if anyone just on that point wants to read a really good book on that, was Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning, which was a gentleman that was in, I think it was the Auschwitz concentration camp, and he was a psychiatrist, I think, or a psychologist before, and he got through Auschwitz, and he said that basically the way he got through, and I'm going to obviously butcher this again, but the way he got through being interned and the loss of all of his family to the gas chambers was he believed, and worked through the whole time he was there, took responsibility for him being there. And he looked at every possible way he contributed to where he was. Like, when the original issues were starting to be raised in Germany, he didn't speak up. He stayed quiet. They didn't leave the country, yada, yada, yada. And he lived his whole life in that cause.
100%.
And the last one is beliefs, is working on what your beliefs are. So working out where you're coming from emotionally. So am I acting from anger or frustration, or am I calm, etc.?
100%.
Okay, so a little bit on that. So how would you suggest people sort of start with this, Shane? Like, obviously it's a journey, but is it something like they need to journal? Is something like journaling, or should you write down what are my beliefs? Is it reminding themselves every day somehow? Like, how would you suggest people can do that to put that into their lives, rather than just be something that all of a sudden one day they pick up and go, I've got a bad mindset, I need to do something today. So for example, I go to the gym 3 to 4 days a week, and I have set days that I go, and I just get up in the morning and I go, and that's it. So is there do you have some mechanisms you usually tell people are really good to do?
Just challenge your beliefs, and because your beliefs are creating the meaning for something. And the question we're always unconsciously trying to answer is, what does this mean to me? What does it mean to me? And then it's like, once you understand what does this mean to me, if you apply a meaning that it's terrible or bad, it's like, well, what are the beliefs that support that? Because that's all just past programming. And then how can I shift my belief? What else could this mean is a really good question. Like, what does this mean? And if it's not a favorable outcome, what else could this mean? How can I turn that's an at cause statement. What else could this mean? And how can I turn this into something that can serve me to go forward? And there's always a way to find something that will serve you to go forward. There's always a positive lesson in every single thing. It's just we're so trained to go, oh, that's bad, terrible, my life sucks. It's like, well, actually, what can I learn from this so that I can improve my life? So if it happens again, my life won't suck.
So every time you feel like something's wrong, shall I say, like you have argument, self-talk, you're saying, you stupid idiot, Ben, etc., is to be able to stop and go, okay, well, what is the situation? What else could this mean?
Yeah.
And writing it down, does that obviously
journaling's journaling's a really cool thing because in two ways, either journal, like just write it down, or verbally talk to someone about it. And sometimes you'll be like, I can't believe I'm actually saying this. I can't believe I think that. But it's just because it's in your mind and you're not challenging it. It's just like going round and round and round and round. But once you get it out, it's like, oh, I can't believe I said that. Or writing it, it's like, I can't believe I'm writing this, but this is what I'm thinking. And then it's like, how stupid does that sound? What else could this mean?
I've done that before, Shane. And I remember I sat down at a time when I was struggling with a few bits and pieces. And I remember I got a bit, because I'm very visual. So I've got like a drawing book and colored pens and all that sort of stuff, and I write all over it, and I just wrote down all the things that I was thinking, and I looked at it and I went, geez, I'm harsh on myself. Like I'm really harsh on myself. So for me, the two things that Ben Law personally has felt over the years as added value was is to be very, very, very careful of my self-talk. And when I feel the self-talk's bad, is to sit down and write them all down on the paper to embarrass myself, essentially. Of how stupid I'm being. And the second one is the you are who you mix with, the mastermind. Like really think carefully about who the hell you let into your life, because it's poison. We've all sat around those people that are really negative. And I know sometimes that can be family members. And we've had that discussion before, haven't we? Sometimes it's family members, but you've really got to limit that. And if you care about your kids, which all of us do, you want to be limiting their exposure to that as well.
Yeah. And it's not so much who you spend time with, but how you spend time with those people as well.
So that's an important distinction.
Yeah. You can't eliminate your family. Like most people aren't willing to eliminate their family in one way or another. So it's like, okay, cool. Are they successful in their area of life? If they're farming or if they've got another business, are they successful or are they not? If they're not successful or as successful as you'd like to be yourself, then I just won't talk to them about business.
Yes.
We'll just talk about family stuff. Or are they really successful as a family person and, I can learn from them? Cool. I'm going to ask how do they parent their kids and stuff. Or are they not doing a good job? Then I'm probably not going to ask them. It all just comes, how do you have that conversation? How do you interact with them?
And keep away the topics that become extremely negative and toxic and all that sort of stuff. The typical ones, gossip or, bitching about someone behind their back. I mean, a lot of people get caught up in that or complaining about the world, because complaining is one of the most toxic things I think you can possibly see, because it's, for most people, it's infectious. Because it's very easy to start complaining. So, okay, fantastic, Shane. That's been amazing, mate. I mean, you're the absolute expert in this, so I love having the conversation. So if people want to find out a little bit more about with you, where can they go, Shane?
So first, just look me up on Facebook, Shane Bird. You'll find me there. Or you can look up my Facebook group, A Farmer's Mind Shift. So A Farmer's Mind Shift is a Facebook group, and anyone can just request to join that, and we can connect through that way. So that's where I add a lot of my content and all that kind of stuff, both on my personal page, but on that group as well. So that's the best two ways to find me, really.
Yeah, and surround yourself with people that are doing something and improving and getting better.
Absolutely. Yep, most definitely.
Perfect. And final question, what is your definition of real wealth?
Definition of real wealth. I think it's probably common or a common phrase, but to be able to do what you want, when you want, where you want, with who you want, and how you want.
Yep, that's a common theme right through. It's essentially boils down to choice, doesn't it?
Yep.
Righto, well, thanks very much for your time, everyone. Reach out to Shane. Feel free to drop him a comment, have a chin wag. Shane's an absolute giver. He spends a lot of time talking to people and helping and educating, and I think he's an amazing resource. And coming from a rural background and a business background, he's got a great understanding in that area. So thanks very much for everything today, Shane.
Thanks, mate. Certainly appreciate being here.
I like to continually improve and do better, so we value any feedback, comments, or suggestions. You can join our new private Facebook group, The Financial Blokes Wealth and Wisdom, and drop me a comment or drop me an email, ben@thefinancialbloke.com.au. Thanks for joining me today again, and I'll catch you with a new episode in 2 weeks' time.